Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions. I'm Ron Mackenzie Lafergie. If you enjoyed this video, please thumbs up and subscribe to the channel down below. Godzilla has been a cultural phenomenon in Japan since the first film in 1954. Since then, the beast has taken the world by storm, terrifying audiences across the globe. But what if he wasn't just on the big screen, but actually attacked in real life? Let's explore. Get ready, it's time to ask the question, what if Godzilla was real? There have been a number of Godzilla films since the original in 1954, and each version of the monster has its own quirks. For the sake of clarity, this video will focus on Shin Godzilla, the 2016 film, as it is one of the most realistic depictions of the attack. Godzilla is a giant aquatic creature, often attacking Japan. It's believed to have been created due to radioactive contamination, which gave it the ability to constantly adapt to its surroundings. It leaves a trail of residual radiation in its wake and is able to shoot atomic blasts from its mouth and tail. Godzilla is one tough cookie, so how could we deal with it? The first step would have to be to evacuate all civilians from the area. Depending on the population density in the area of the attack, this could take some time, but it would be of the utmost importance. Between Godzilla's attacks, atomic breath, and residual radiation left after it, not to mention the attempts to stop the beast, those in the area would be in a great deal of danger. Once the area was evacuated, efforts to deal with the beast could begin in earnest. Unfortunately, it seems that most weapons don't work against Godzilla. As we saw in the 2016 film, even powerful missiles were unable to pierce its thick hide. This would lead one to look to nuclear weapons, but this raises another concern. How would you stop this huge and tanky beast while minimizing collateral damage? One possible option is capturing Godzilla. This would be very useful since it would allow us to study the beast and learn from it, and would likely be less damaging to the city and its people. Unfortunately, this would be difficult to achieve, particularly with its atomic breath able to blast it out of most containment areas. Furthermore, if it had the same adaptive abilities as it did in Shin Godzilla, the longer it was alive, the more dangerous it would become. This likely rules out the option of capturing it alive, since there's a chance that it would simply adapt to whatever was holding it captured. This means that killing it would likely be the only option. Sadly, that's easier said than done. Shin Godzilla offered two potential solutions to the Godzilla problem. The first and less desirable option is the aforementioned use of thermonuclear weapons. This would potentially be enough to take the creature out, but would result in a huge amount of collateral damage. Not only that, but attacking a radioactive creature with nuclear weapons could result in unexpected consequences. The likely superior plan, which ended up being very effective in the film, is the use of blood coagulant to freeze the monster from the inside. This was done by baiting it into using its atomic breath, then quickly injecting it with coagulant while it was recharging. This would be a difficult plan and would require a great deal of coordination, but it could be very effective, especially if Godzilla was killed for good, thus preventing further adaptation. The only problem is, this coordination could be difficult to achieve. One aspect of defending against Godzilla that is often overlooked is the bureaucratic side of things. While one might assume that a giant monster attacking a city would be enough to bring people together, that isn't necessarily the case. As we've seen in various relief efforts in recent years, sometimes the resources are there to help, but the hands of the government are tied due to policy restrictions. As it happens, Shin Godzilla did an excellent job of highlighting just how much of a problem governmental bureaucracy would be in dealing with Godzilla. With so many different branches of the government being in charge of different things, it is very difficult to coordinate all these efforts successfully and quickly. This means that even if we had the proper weaponry to deal with Godzilla, it could be difficult to organize and coordinate the effort in time to save the city. This would be particularly problematic when attempting to coordinate the actions of several governments. And now we return to our question, what if Godzilla was real? Well, humanity would be in for the fight of our lives. Civilian safety would be a primary concern, with efforts to evacuate citizens from the area of the attack. Capture may not be an option if it had the adaptive capabilities we saw in Shin Godzilla, which leaves us with killing the beast. While nuclear weapons would likely be effective, the collateral damage caused could be too much to bear. For this reason, a method similar to the one in the film would likely be employed. Fool it into expending its nuclear energy, then freeze or incapacitate it while it is dormant. Unfortunately, this might be easier said than done, since government bureaucracy could delay the response until it was too late.
King Kong. Not such a far-fetched idea when you really think about it. A massive prehistoric gorilla living on an island in the middle of the Indian Ocean with other prehistoric dinosaurs roaming around. What's there not to love? If you've seen any of the King Kong films or any film featuring Kong, then you likely know his appearance and size tend to vary, but for the most part, he's just a very large, incredibly strong gorilla. Or so it seems. Maybe it's what the prehistoric Gigantopithecus looked like. Maybe these King Kong looking apes were in fact real and we're just fortunate enough to live in a time where they've gone extinct. Either way, we gotta talk about one of my favorites and an absolute classic today. On Life's Biggest Questions, we are asking, what if King Kong was real? Make sure to smash that like button, and let's get right into this one. Now, it seems there are only a couple of ways that King Kong turns from fiction into reality. Of course, there's the possibility that this prehistoric Gigantopithecus, an ape-like beast, believed to have been about 9 feet tall and about 1,200 pounds, is the real King Kong. Considering how they roamed Earth up until about 300,000 years ago, it is quite possible the tale of the Gigantopithecus led to what we know now as King Kong. What I'm saying is that over the last, say, 300,000 years or so, the tail of the Gigantopithecus was, and its size has likely varied. Meaning it's quite possible when the idea of King Kong was first conceived, it was inspired by the idea of these prehistoric apes who were said to be incredibly strong and large in size. In essence, what I'm getting at is maybe the world had a bunch of mini King Kongs roaming around, and that's just the way it was. They weren't 100 feet tall as Kong himself is believed to be, but still standing at 9 feet, weighing 1,200 pounds, and with the ability to lift things up to 10 times their weight, well, these things aren't too far off what King Kong is. So it's quite possible King Kong was real and we just aren't alive to know it. Now, of course, there's also another angle to go with here, the more fun, speculative, SPC type, where King Kong is simply a lab experiment gone wrong. As we know, animals have been used for experiments in the past, and unfortunately will likely continue to be used against their will. It was a big thing in the beauty community, and as we know, the scientific community loves to use mice. Now, that's not to say Kong was birthed from a bad batch of lipstick that some beauty company was trying on, but it is quite possible that Kong was simply the result of a lab experiment gone wrong. Maybe, say some sort of plague or pandemic takes over, and scientists scramble to get a vaccine made as soon as possible to save humanity. They tested on an ape first, given how close they are to humans, and then bam! Now this ape has been genetically transformed to become one of the biggest, scariest animals or monsters ever known to the human race. And we refer to him as King Kong, the 8th wonder of the world. Maybe the lab kept him a secret, and as his size started growing so significantly, they got help from the government to drop it on a remote island in the middle of the Indian Ocean, thinking it'll eventually die there. But it didn't, and a filmmaker or explorer ends up finding it, bringing it to New York City, it climbs the Empire State Building and grabs a girl, breaks a few planes, and that's the end of that. Alright, that was a mix of like the vaccine with the movie, obviously getting fictional, joking around. Now on a more serious note here guys, I think the reality is if King Kong was real, we all know how bad that would be. Of course, if he was stuck on Skull Island with no way of really leaving, then we wouldn't have much to worry about. Of course, the scientific community would want to do some research into this beast-like creature. Where did it come from? Are there more? What is it? If it was an experiment gone wrong, then Kong would likely just be stuck on the island, potentially monitored by the people who know it exists, and that's really the end of that. We'd be none the wiser, and life would continue on. However, if somehow, some way the beast was able to cross the Indian Ocean, either by the hands of an overzealous adventurer or even the government, well, that's a very different story. At the end of the day, the reality is that enough damage to anything would likely be able to take it down. However, even if we were to shoot bazookas, use tanks and grenades to try to defeat the beast that is King Kong, surely he would inflict damage as well. Contrary to the movie, if Kong was real and was in New York City, it likely wouldn't necessarily run around wreaking havoc in the same manner. If anything, he'd probably just be very scared to be in a foreign environment, and I can tell you right now, he wouldn't climb the Empire State Building as it would simply just crumble at Kong's first grip. Still, that doesn't mean that this thing wouldn't cause mass destruction, simply trying to flee its captors. It'd be very interesting to see if PETA would also get involved as well, potentially trying to free Kong and risking their lives along the way. Safe to say, there are only 2 realistic ways King Kong being real can play out. Either he's on an island and just lives there until he ultimately dies, or following the storyline of the movie, a team decides to hold him captive and show him off almost as a circus act, if you will. They bring him over to New York City, which I don't see how that in itself would be possible, as there wouldn't be any way to contain this thing in the first place. But this entire video is fictional. We're talking about what would happen if a 100-foot ape was real. I think we all know the answer. It would pretty much destroy the world until a giant lizard / dinosaur looking thing comes and the 2 of them have an absolutely epic battle.
With the upcoming kaiju blockbuster Godzilla vs Kong on the horizon, the question has to be asked, who is stronger? Of course, the many major Godzilla fans out there will let you know that there's no way a giant ape stands up to the legendary lizard-like monstrosity. Godzilla has powers and size beyond anyone's wildest imagination, so if this fight were to happen outside of a major motion picture, it's probably safe to say that Godzilla would crush Kong in an instant. But that opens up another line of inquiry. There are so many different versions of Godzilla that have shown up over the years, so which one would be the strongest? What is the strongest version of Godzilla? Since the first Godzilla dropped way back in 1954, there have been a grand total of 36 Godzilla movies released, 32 of them made in Japan and 4 by American studios. That's a lot of Godzilla, don't you think? Now, not every Godzilla movie totally overhauled the design of the legendary monster, meaning that there aren't 36 brand spanking new Godzillas out there. There are quite a few other monsters in the Godzilla verse though, but for today we'll stick to our titular titan. Today we'll do our best to briefly look at a few iterations of Godzilla and then pick the one who could squash the rest of the competition. Wouldn't that be fun, a Godzilla battle royale? Could be a movie, could be a video game, somebody make it happen. But until somebody from Toho decides to officially bring all the different Godzillas together, we'll just have to stick to discussing the implications of such a fight. Right on. It's gonna get sort of weird, especially because of how Godzilla works. See, if we look at how the monster developed over the years, one would likely see that Godzilla tends to get stronger after every movie. Like, it'll struggle against an antagonist for the duration of one flick, and then in the next movie it'll be clear that Godzilla is now a cut above that previous beast. Sure, there will be stronger enemies, but Godzilla knows how to overcome any challenge. That's just how Godzilla do. So as we move along on the Godzilla timeline, we might see a pattern emerging. Try not to focus on the size of the kaiju when discussing strength. Godzilla also has a history of annihilating much larger beasts, which is definitely worth considering. With all that out of the way, let's get into the meat and bones here, the radioactive meat and bones if you will. Kicking us off at the absolute weakest, we've got Shin Godzilla. It's a great movie, don't get me wrong, but this is a version of Godzilla that is super vulnerable to conventional weaponry for whatever reason. Most Godzillas shrug off human tech like it's nothing and barely break a sweat until an enormous otherworldly threat appears. A lot can tank like 50 nukes too. Shin Godzilla, even though it can evolve super rapidly and might someday become wicked powerful, is just too vulnerable to all sorts of attacks. And in the end, the humans just sort of like put it to sleep. Lots of fun to be had with this design, but let's be honest with ourselves. If any other Godzilla had to fight Shin Godzilla, it would be a bloodbath. Now with that out of the way, let's get to some more solid contenders. Next up in the pecking order is the OG Godzilla, 1954, black and white chaos for days, let's go. Now after discussing how Godzilla powers up after each movie, you could probably see this pick coming. It's not hard to see why, even though it is totally iconic and without it we wouldn't have Godzilla. 1954 is weaker than the rest of the lads. Now we'll jump ahead a little to ensure that we keep the big lad from the next movie in the conversation. There are a few Godzillas between 1954 and Monsterverse, but what can you do? Only so many hours in the day. So the Monsterverse Godzilla, the one featured in King of the Monsters and the upcoming Godzilla vs Kong, is pretty strong. Like, stronger than the Showa era Godzilla by a bit, which is pretty impressive. It managed to defeat Ghidorah after powering up thanks to Mothra and became the de facto leader of the monsters. Like, even after taking on a head-on blast from the Oxygen Destroyer, Godzilla came back and battled it out. What a legend. However, in comparison to Godzillas of days past, this version doesn't quite cut it. Like, let's say Mechagodzilla came to the party. Monsterverse would have zero chance. None. If the Oxygen Destroyer can sideline it for a little while, Mechagodzilla would stomp it out like a poorly built campfire. Sheesh. The thing is, Mechagodzilla isn't even the strongest. Space Godzilla is known to be stronger than both Godzilla and Mechagodzilla. Like, it exists because Godzilla and Biollante DNA were sucked into a black hole. It managed to travel faster than the speed of light in order to battle Godzilla on Earth. If Godzilla and the humans didn't team up to allow for Godzilla to absorb some next level cosmic power, it probably would have been game over pretty easily. Plus, just look at this thing. It's got enormous crystals sprouting from all over its body. Wild. So if Space Godzilla doesn't top the list, then what does? Well, it's gonna be a close call between two of the most insane creatures going. We've got Heisei Godzilla, who ended up absorbing Space Godzilla and becoming what one might call infinitely powerful. It can destroy stars and shoot heat rays that hit a temperature of infinity. It carries enough power to annihilate entire planets. So what's gonna beat it when it's at full power? Well, Godzilla Earth is. Holy smokes, is this Godzilla strong. It can destroy moons, it can wipe out dimensional portals and fight high-dimensional beings. It's off the scales in pretty much every regard except for its size. But even that, coming in at 50 meters, is pretty impressive. There's no stronger Godzilla than Godzilla Earth, although Heisei Godzilla might put up a fight against it if you add some caveats. So there you have it, folks, the strongest version of Godzilla for all to see.
Over the years, there have been numerous adaptations, sequels, or just media in general that has included King Kong. Of course, there's the original film dating back to 1933, 1962's King Kong vs. Godzilla, 2005's King Kong, which was the second remake of the original, and of course King Kong from Godzilla vs. King Kong, which is the one from the Monsterverse. And that doesn't even cover all the Kongs that we've seen over the last 9 decades or so. Point being, there are numerous versions of King Kong, and with the movie just days away from release, we thought why not compare each one and determine which is truly the king of all Kongs. Today on Life's Biggest Questions, we're asking what is the strongest version of King Kong? We'll be taking into consideration things such as abilities, size, weight, and even opponents when making comparisons. Smash that like button or send me location, and let's get into it. Now for starters, let's just look at the size of each Kong throughout the films. Issue here will be determining if we're going to use the actual size of the physical mechanical machine made for the film, or if we're going to use the size they tried to incorporate in the script. For example, in 1933's original film, King Kong, the actual mechanical beast used in the film was approximately 18 feet on Skull Island and 24 feet in New York. However, in the film, Kong at one point was depicted to be between 50 to 60 feet, yet RKO, the film company who produced the film, used promotional material claiming the beast was 50 feet tall. For the sake of this video, we'll use the script or film's size, not the actual physical mechanical version for size. Alright, now that we have a common understanding, let's look at how these things differ in size. In the 1962 film King Kong vs Godzilla, the Japanese version, the ape is standing at 148 feet tall, significantly larger than the original. In 1967 King Kong Escapes, the beast is only 66 feet, and in the first remake, 1976's King Kong, the beast is only 55 feet. How they determined these sizes, I really couldn't tell you. Maybe it had to do a bit with logistics and a bit with the creative, but really who knows? Peter Jackson's 2005 King Kong saw one of the smallest beasts to date, standing at just 25 feet tall. And then in Kong Skull Island, which is the same Kong that will be featured in the upcoming film, everyone's favorite monster grew to about 100 feet tall. If you've seen the Godzilla vs King Kong trailer, you see the two beasts fighting at one point, appearing to be about the same size. And in Kong Skull Island, I mentioned how Kong was about 100 feet tall. That being said, it's important to note he was just a teenager and was expected to continue growing. In Godzilla King of the Monsters, which takes place in the same Monsterverse as Kong Skull Island, and of course the upcoming film, the giant lizard is somewhere between 350 to 400 feet tall. Meaning in this upcoming film, assuming that Godzilla's size has stayed the same, Kong would need to be equally as large. Point being, up until the Godzilla vs King Kong film, it seems the 1962 version of King Kong, from the movie with the same name, was the largest. Actually, the 1962 version is King Kong vs Godzilla, and this year's film is Godzilla vs King Kong, so I guess there is a difference there. Either way, it's clear the largest version of King Kong over the years is the one we'll be watching on our screens in coming days. Yet just because there is a significant size advantage over the rest, doesn't necessarily mean he's the strongest. Sure, he may have the size and the physical strength, but until we see the film itself, we don't truly know how strong this King Kong really is. And I say that because when comparing strength, well, it seems the two that would be comparable would be the Kong from the 1962 version and the Kong from our present day Godzilla vs King Kong film. Again, the present day Kong has a significant size advantage. We're talking about triple the size of the 1962 version. That being said, Toho, the production company who made the original King Kong vs Godzilla, has come forth saying that Kong was supposed to win. This has been debated by fans over the years, but if the production company had plans for Kong to win, that would clearly mean he's stronger than Godzilla. However, in the book Definitive Edition Godzilla Introduction, Tomoyuki Tanaka claimed the two ended their fight in a draw. Again, they'd be scaled down to size, so I still think that may give the present day version of King Kong, standing at about 400 feet or so, the advantage. Unfortunately, because I have yet to see the upcoming film, I'm not sure how things play out. Who knows who wins? Will it be Kong, Godzilla, or neither? Only one way to find out, and that's by watching the film. Now I will say guys, this video is not even an advertisement for the film, but at this rate it really should be. I've been promoting it like crazy, so if any of the producers are watching this, you can just send a check in the mail. What I can say is in the 1962 King Kong vs Godzilla, at one point it seems Godzilla is the more powerful beast, at one point even beating Kong. That is until Kong is struck with lightning, energizing him and giving him an electrical surge throughout his body, which is used to harm Godzilla. Aside from his incredible strength and intelligence, Kong was also immune to radioactive energy, and it seems Godzilla's atomic breath didn't affect him as much as one would think. Aside from burning some fur off, Kong can apparently take it. Now when comparing the strength of the two Kongs, say the smaller 1962 version and the present day one, although the present day one has a size advantage, he may not be as durable. Until we see how things play out, I can't say for sure which Kong is the strongest, but under the assumption he puts up a pretty good fight against Godzilla this time around as well, I think our present day 350 foot to 400 foot King Kong is the strongest. Now as always guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one down below. Of course my answer may change after I see the film, but I'm pretty confident the 400 foot beast will defeat any and all other Kongs, even Mechanicong. If you know what I'm talking about, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm sure since the beginning of time there has been a battle between a snake and a monkey, and off the top of my head, I'm not sure who would win that fight given that the snake would be more agile and the monkey would be significantly stronger. However, what we're talking about in today's video wouldn't resemble much of a monkey fighting a snake. Kong is an ape, meaning he's much more like you and I than a monkey. Kong is smarter, stronger, and more resourceful than the average monkey, because he's an ape. Big difference. The Titanoboa isn't just an ordinary snake either. These things were the largest snakes known to mankind, and lived 50 to 60 million years ago with all those giant dinosaurs. Meaning that the Titanoboa had to fight a massive ape, potentially resembling a dinosaur, well, it wouldn't be the Titanoboa's first rodeo. Today on Life's Biggest Questions, we're asking, what if the Titanoboa snake fought King Kong? Smash that like button and let's get right into this one. So there's a few ways to break this bad boy down. We could talk about how King Kong will likely play with the Titanoboa, almost as if it's a toy, given their size difference. Kong stands at nearly 400 feet, at least as per the last trailer for the film Godzilla Vs Kong. And it's believed the Titanoboa was about 40 feet in length, meaning the snake would be about a tenth of the size of this beast. Now that likely wouldn't be much of a fight, as Kong would quite literally be able to rip the Titanoboa in half if he were able to catch the thing. Although the Titanoboa would definitely have an advantage when it comes to agility and moving quickly in comparison to size, Kong is still quite agile, given his large frame. Now for the sake of this video, I say we scale them both to the same size, whether that means the Titanoboa grows to 400 feet or we shrink Kong back down to 40 feet, closer to his original roots. I mean, we could go as fact-based as possible, but then that would inevitably give the Titanoboa victory, given that it was real and Kong is fictional. But who would want things to end there? So instead, let's break down this fight. As is usually the case with most fights, whoever gets the first shot in would certainly have the upper hand. For example, if Kong was able to grab the Titanoboa by the neck or near its head, to no surprise, Kong would have quite the advantage. If the Titanoboa was able to strike Kong first, potentially going for his neck or maybe his face, then to no surprise, the snake is going to have a huge advantage. But that doesn't necessarily mean whoever strikes first would win the battle. Given that we have two absolutely different monsters with very different ways of attacking, it seems there would be a handful of variables when looking at a fight between these two. For example, where the fight takes place would be a huge factor. In an open flat land, odds are Kong would have the upper hand, yet in a place like the Amazon, for example, the Titanoboa would potentially have more places to camouflage or even hide, preparing for a sneak attack. Now given Kong's strength, it seems when all is said and done, he would likely be able to win this battle. The Titanoboa wasn't poisonous, meaning it's believed that this thing would constrict its prey, literally squeezing the life out until death. Whether that meant wrapping around the neck or torso with every breath of oxygen taken in, the grip would just get tighter and tighter until there is no air left. Yet when it comes to something like Kong, unlike a lot of other animals that the Titanoboa would hunt, the ape would have an advantage most other animals don't. Fingers like ours. Meaning if the snake were to wrap around Kong's torso or neck, he could quite literally try to unravel it. And given Kong's strength, although the Titanoboa was believed to be strong, it's not King Kong. This guy is the king of apes, so no one would be stronger. And with that in mind, it seems that Kong would be able to win a fight against the Titanoboa. Even if the Titanoboa was able to wrap around Kong's body and arms, restricting the ape from using his hands, it's quite possible Kong's strength would overpower the Titanoboa, even if it was wrapped around him. Simply by stretching his arms outward, the Titanoboa would either once again be literally ripped apart, or would feel the pressure and realize it's no match for Kong's strength. At this point, it'd likely unwrap and try to get away as quickly as possible. See guys, not every fight between a fictional ape and a prehistoric snake have to result in death. It's quite possible the Titanoboa realizes it really is not a match for Kong and finds a way to escape before Kong turns it into his next meal. Given that the Titanoboa was also able to move very quickly underwater and had the ability to be underwater for prolonged periods of time, if this fight happened near a large body of water, then that's a very different story. Kong would likely try to remove himself from the situation, given the advantage the Titanoboa would have, but that doesn't necessarily mean Kong would lose in the water either. It would just be a much closer fight. Now as always guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one in the comments down below. If these two were to fight scaled to the same size, who would win?
Hello internet and welcome back to the most inquisitive channel on YouTube, Life's Biggest Questions. The place where we hypothetically pit the fiercest, the meanest, the most grotesque of all fictional behemoths against each other in a bid to find the ultimate winner. Well, in theory, anyway. What's going on guys? As per usual, I'll be your disembodied floating voice Jack Finch as we thank our lucky stars that we don't own a sea view apartment, buy ourselves a one-way ticket all the way to the Arctic Circle while we wait for this whole thing to blow over as we suspiciously ask the question, what if Cthulhu fought Godzilla? Roll the clip. Now, there's a lot of exposition here that could potentially hinder our results, the majority of which come down to which varying fictional versions of both Godzilla and Cthulhu that we present. In most scenarios, both Godzilla and Cthulhu are such vastly opposing entities that they'd probably never even notice each other's presence. But that's not any fun at all, is it? We want to see some cataclysmic showdown that sunders the planet smack bang down the middle, great thundering behemoths going toe to toe in an abyssal melee that heralds the beginning of the cosmos tearing itself apart. So, in the words of Maximus Decimus Meridius, are you not entertained?
Are you not entertained?
Before we plunge into that bizarre kettle of fish though, you know how it is by now guys. If you're a fan of this video, Godzilla, the Lovecraftian mythos, or just life's biggest questions in general, then please be a dear and hit that thumbs up button as well as that subscribe bell so you can stay up to date with our latest and greatest uploads. If you've got a big question that you just can't keep to yourself, then please spit it out in the comment box down below. On with the show. Our boy Cthulhu, the Sleeper of R'lyeh, the High Priest of the Great Old Ones, is a fictional cosmic entity created by the grandfather of science fiction horror himself, Howard Phillips Lovecraft. And since his first inky inception in 1928's The Call of Cthulhu, he's been so prevalent in modern culture that you'll even find his tumultuous tendrils painted on a children's lunchbox. But that's no grand feat compared to the god of destruction, the king of the monsters himself, Godzilla, who's no stranger to the artistic immortalization of Tupperware. Godzilla's first appearance was in Ishiro Honda's 1954 silver screen apocalypse of the same name, which swiftly launched the King Lizard into the lofty ranks of monstrous cultural icons. Since then, both of these world-ending buddies have seen scores of recreations and canonical additions that have augmented their varying campaigns of destruction. First, we should hone in on what makes these big guys tick, and the arsenal they've got to play with under their metaphorical hoods. Since his time spent on the silver screen, Godzilla has thrown down with some of the most powerful entities in the cosmos. He's racked up a staggering 58 bouts throughout his time as the king of the monsters, notching 42 wins, 7 losses, and 9 draws. That's a pretty impressive ratio, considering that Godzilla isn't exactly battling for entertainment, but more to be the destroyer or savior of the planet. Let's not beat around the bush, Godzilla is incredibly powerful, so let's not dismiss him as some giant lizard that breathes atomic energy. Godzilla towers in at over 118 meters tall, which varies on the version, but we'll use Shin Godzilla as a benchmark, and weighs in at a staggering 100,000 tons. Just his heart measures 60 feet across and weighs 100 tons, pumping 530,000 gallons of blood around his enormous frame. He's resistant to nuclear blasts and all manner of humanity's modern weaponry, and he can bring the world's greatest armies to their knees with a mere belch. Godzilla's most iconic means of destruction is his trademark atomic breath, which, while it sounds like a grotesque cloud of miasma, is actually a highly concentrated beam attack of unbridled atomic energy that can level entire cities without breaking a sweat. Combine that with his spiral heat ray, his nuclear pulse, and his nigh immortal durability, and Godzilla is looking like quite the contender in this hypothetical bout. In fact, in the Godzilla in Hell storyline, a comic miniseries released in 2015, Godzilla himself marches into hell and annihilates Satan, and to bring his point home, he even brings down the big guy upstairs. Forget that though, because Godzilla has even killed Zeus, the father of the Greek pantheon, so as far as gods go, the god of destruction really does live up to his namesake. But what about Great Old Ones, which, if I'm being honest, is where this showdown is ultimately decided. Comparatively, Cthulhu is incredibly weak when you stand him up against Lovecraft's Yog-Sothory. At the bottom of the pecking order, we've got the Great Old Ones, where Cthulhu resides as their high priest. Granted, pretty powerful, but above that we have the Elder Gods, arguably of equal strength, but who regularly successfully oppose the Great Old Ones. And then we have the Outer Gods, who, let's face it, are the most powerful entities in the cosmos. It's not even worth trying to pit opponents against them, because no matter how hard you try, you can't brawl against the intangible. Put it this way, in the Call of Cthulhu, the sleeping god is defeated by ramming a small tugboat into him, ripping his head apart like an exploded bladder. Lovecraft's words, not mine. A freaking boat ripped him in two. What do you think Godzilla would do to him? But here's the thing, and I know it's not the answer you wanted, but it's the answer you need. In his house at R'lyeh, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. It doesn't matter what you do to him, sleeping or semi-awake, Cthulhu can only and will only bring destruction when the stars are correctly aligned. Even if he's defeated, he'll regenerate or be rebirthed by his daughter wife Cthulhu. Godzilla wins this battle hands down. The king of the monsters is just far too powerful, even compared to the majority of the Cthulhu mythos. But it'd be like watching a rabid dog tear apart a fluffy new pillow that also happens to constantly regenerate itself in an eternal cycle of abyssal slumber. Yeah, that's an image that I'll just let you ponder on. Let that sink in.
Ever watched a movie and wondered to yourself, man, what happens after all of this? Like, the protagonists all fall in love, the bad guy's incinerated or blown to bits or whatever, the news anchors are reporting that the day has been saved, but has it? Post-disaster / giant battle / rampage, there's gonna be a lot to deal with. It goes a lot deeper than rebuilding some apartment complexes and paving over some enormous footprints too. There's a lot to consider when fixing up post-Godzilla attacks, so let's ask what we're all wondering. How would a Godzilla attack hurt the economy? One would have to assume that the effects of a monster rampage would be widespread and far-reaching. Like, sure, the immediate infrastructure being toppled would cost a lot of money, but imagine all the fallout afterwards. Nuclear and economic, of course. You know, because Godzilla is essentially a giant walking nuclear weapon. Get it? Sorry. I'll get to the actual content. As a baseline, let's get some hard numbers going. We can discuss the general effects as we go. After doing some truly cursory research, I've discovered a few examples that we can pull from. Number one is a much more American issue, the aftermath of the final fight from the first Avengers movie. Remember when that was the most bombastic thing imaginable? Oh, how times have changed. I know it's not the perfect one-to-one comparison, but it's a good starting point. According to the Hollywood Reporter, the cost of an enormous city-spanning battle in the Big Apple would cost something like $160 billion. Holy smokes, right? The damage itself would make up a little less than half of that, with cleanup and environmental costs making up the rest. That's a pretty penny for sure, but at least the world was saved, right? And it's not like just one person would be picking up the tab either. Taxes and emergency funds would be used to ensure that life in the city could maybe one day return to normal. Of course, the cascading costs would be something else entirely. Once everything did get put back together, people would have to start imagining life in a world where this kind of thing happens again. So in addition to paying for all the repairs, new infrastructure would have to be put in place to stand up to possible future threats. Funds would need to be allocated towards programs to ensure safe and effective evacuations over time, and folks in power would have to make all sorts of promises to have all sorts of safeguards against supernatural attacks. To be honest, after an attack like that, a whole bunch of new jobs would probably be created too. But hey, that's just the Avengers we're talking about. Whatever crazy threat they face off against is likely less destructive overall than a kaiju battle, and less likely to require Geiger counters in the aftermath. Has anyone hashed out the exact price of a Godzilla attack? Well, actually, yes. IT Media Business talked with a Tokyo-based business consultant to try and put a price tag on a recent Godzilla outing. Looking at Shin Godzilla, the cost looks pretty hefty. The attacks this rapidly evolving kaiju masterminds would cost something like 9 trillion yen, or 87 billion US dollars. And that's just the physical, structural damage to Tokyo and its many buildings and amenities. We've also got to take into account the weapons used against the towering threat. Military technology is infamously expensive. Plus, in Shin Godzilla, stuff like bullet trains and drones are used and abused when fighting the beast, and they don't come cheap either. We can probably tack on a few more $1 billion to the attack because of that. This is all pretty surface level stuff though. Think about what would happen to all the people whose homes and businesses were wrecked during the attack. What are they supposed to do? Rapid evacuations aren't easy and require a lot of stuff to be mobilized immediately. And then once everyone's out of immediate danger, you've got to house and feed them for a while. Displaced people need somewhere to stay, and businesses need new bases of operation if they're to remain profitable. So there's all of that to consider. Plus, if we're now living in a world in which kaiju might just pop out of the ocean from time to time, it would probably be prudent to move major cities away from the coastline. A lot of pretty important places have developed right against oceans. Moving all of that infrastructure to less developed places and building new cities for all these kaiju-fearing folks would be a crazy undertaking to say the least. So the final price tag reported by Sora News 24 lands somewhere in the $815 billion range. Not cheap at all. And that's just considering Tokyo and the surrounding areas. If other major waterfront cities decided to follow suit just in case, there'd be a whole lot more spending going on. And something tells me that Godzilla doesn't have the funds to pay reparations. Maybe if we could weaponize the monster and use it as insurance in the coming days, and maybe teach it to build and make it do lots of heavy lifting, although that is tough for a creature with relatively short arms. Dang. Now, after all that, I have some additional bad news. Shin Godzilla, although it has potential to be quite destructive, is one of the weakest iterations of the legendary kaiju to date. Plus, it didn't fight against any other monster. All it did was attack Tokyo and fend off humanity's weapons. If a stronger version of Godzilla touched down in Tokyo, the damage would likely be a lot more severe. Could you imagine the cost of repairing whatever got annihilated by an infinite spiral heat ray? Or what if this version of the legendary lizard had to fight off another threat? The crossfire would definitely make some wallets weep. So yeah, a Godzilla attack would present the world with a whole lot of damage to fix, but the physical damage is just the beginning. All the buildings destroyed had a purpose, and those purposes would need to be relocated ASAP if folks didn't want everything to fall apart. Add in the cost of essentially dealing with a city's worth of displaced people, and you've got a whole new issue to contend with. A threat like a kaiju would alter the way the world operated on a level we've never seen. It would present us with an existential threat previously unheard of. Although it could actually be a good thing. Sure, it would put quite a strain on the economy as we know it, with plenty of money and resources required to repair the damage. But if we pivoted from intercontinental competition and our current profit-based mindset to a more unified one meant to protect humanity from Godzilla and his contemporaries, maybe we'd find this new purpose was better for us overall, helping each other because we're human, rather than because we can make some money and prove ourselves better than everyone else. Maybe that wouldn't be so bad after all. So what do you think? Did I cover what needed to be covered concerning Godzilla's impact on the economy? Would you rather deal with the death knells of late-stage capitalism or the roars of a nuclear weapon with legs? Who would win, Godzilla or the Avengers? Make sure you let me know down in the comments.